I'll say this. I think, for us, and it can't become trite. However, we do have to be able to pull from and really learn and grow from each and every day, and that includes certainly games. And we do have young men that I think realize the value, even though that improvement and that practice may be incremental. They know the kind of dedication that's required each day at practices too, in addition to preparing for a game for this Saturday.
From an offensive standpoint, what do you need to do to become more diverse? To use get the tailback more involved, maybe the tight end, use some positions that haven't been.
Yeah, we're better. Anytime that if our tailbacks have more carries, if we're able to kind of distribute the ball in different ways, we are better. However, we also got to be aware too that I don't necessarily think that means we're going to line up in the I formation and run ISO. Go grab a playbook from a school 40 years ago and they're wearing red and they're playing a school 150 miles south of them, located in Lawrence or something like that, and say that's exactly the cookie cutter approach we're going to utilize to hand the ball to that guy. But we are when we have a few more guys that are involved.
How do you get there? How do you get those guys more involved?
Well, the other part is too. I think for what we utilize frequently on offense, the defense plays a factor, at least in terms of a read. And there may be times where some guys end up shooting more shots in a basketball game. That can be a factor also, but it'll help us the more guys that are, and that have whether they're carries or some catches.
And what do you remember about Tim McVeigh down there? Was it 3 years ago? His first start at New Mexico. What do you recall from him that night?
2 years ago, scored a few touchdowns. I think that evening there were a couple things that stood out. We really, I think, for the most part, struggled on offense, at least in terms of if you look at first downs, might only had about 14. If you look turnovers, there were some turnovers. And yet there were enough big plays to stay close in that game. And certainly he was involved with those.
There have been a lot of big plays in this series, both sides, over the past four years or so. Is that going to be a key? Would it be to limit those and to make those?
Yes.
Why is this series so apt to producing those plays?
I don't know if it is. I don't know if the sample size is to a point where we can say that. I mean, there have been some years where it's been a little bit lower scoring too. It's not like we have long-term cycles. This year, I'll say this. I mean, they are. You look in recent years, unquestionably one of the probably 4 or 5 best teams in the country when it comes to running the football and generating double-digit gains running the football. If you just said, hey, if you had to pick one team in the country that has the most 10-plus yard runs in the last 4 years, I'd pick this squad that we're facing, and some of those have come against us too.
And how is our offense different with Lamont Jordan at quarterback? And it sounds like he will be playing.
Great quickness, extremely dynamic, an electric player. And yet Gerhardt's is a heck of a player too, and that was evident. I thought he played exceptionally well last Saturday out at Tulsa.
And what do you recall about the recruiting process with Sancho Coppola out of New Mexico?
I'll say this: he is a great fit at the Air Force Academy. He had indicated that he was interested in coming here, and he is a very, very strong leader for us, and fortunately he's here at the academy, and it's been quite beneficial for Santo too, in terms of the way that he's grown as a young man, and the quality of the education that he's able to to earn here, and the influence. I mean, he is you talk about fervor and energy and love and respect for others, and a guy that's Very magnetic, not necessarily trying to be overly charismatic by what's real on the inside of him. He's as good as they come.
And is that a region you recruit heavily? I don't recall seeing a lot of New Mexico players on your roster.
Well, we will go anywhere in the country. I think that population bases probably play a little bit of the proportion, at least when you include not only the population, but maybe areas that, have some pretty significant strength as far as playing the sport. Areas that really you can tell there's some investment in education in those areas. And, we've had a few guys from New Mexico. It's not a Steve Sin, who's currently a part of our staff, was from Albuquerque. Travis Decker was an excellent tight end here. And a young man that went to Georgetown. He's just finished his med school at Georgetown. And he was from the Albuquerque area. So we'll recruit anywhere. I mean, there's some proximity there between, especially where most of the population is, between Santa Fe and Albuquerque. But it's also not a huge state in terms of population. So, golly, I'm trying to think, state-wise, we probably aren't going to have as many guys from maybe New Hampshire or Wyoming or, some of the areas that may have a little bit less population as we may in Texas. But we're going to recruit from each of the time zones.
And you said he indicated he had an interest in coming here. How was that, a questionnaire? Had someone reached out to him? How did you first find him, I guess, and find about that interest?
God, I can't pinpoint exactly what it was. If you said what was the initial indicator, we became aware of him there in I want to say April of his junior year, and kind of really that was the launching point. And we knew he had a very good frame. The feedback was phenomenal from the school, especially in terms of the leadership aptitude that he had.
Okay. And Mo Fafita had 2 tackles for loss the other day. How has his progression been?
He played really well. And, I think one of the things, with Mo is he was an outstanding wrestler in high school. He does have really very good stamina. I think sometimes we think stamina and it means automatically you're 140 pounds and, so you can run, 10Ks and half marathons. And he, his strength, the use of his hands, his lower body power, and then being able to translate it into being productive, he was.